So what's up people, and welcome to the Mission 81 discussion of Spy Family. So Mission 81 came out recently, and as always I will leave a link to this mission that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, I will go take a look at it before they pull this mission back. Okay, so if you recall, Mission 80 went from a very funny mission to a very serious mission instantaneously when the WISE organization found out that there was a mole planted in their organization, and that mole has gotten their hands on some very sensitive information, including information about Operation Strix, and they were on their way back to Ostania to give it to the Ostanian secret police. So of course Lloyd was called in and the WISE organization mobilized immediately. But of course, Yuri was also called in, and the Ostanian secret police also mobilized. And so now we're in Mission 81, and Mission 81 introduces us to this mole. And from the introduction, we find out that he is a very competent agent. His name is Winston Wheeler, and I will have to say, just from the information we're given at the very beginning of this mission, he seems to be the most competent agent next to Twilight. He is up there with Twilight in terms of skill of espionage, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. In fact, while he was a mole, it seems Twilight and Winston worked together, and Twilight himself said this guy is very, very good. And what's interesting is he gives me the Day of the Jackal vibes. If you ever saw that movie or read that novel, this guy really makes me feel like he's that sort of persona. A very serious agent, no nonsense sort of personality. Somebody who Twilight used to be before he kind of joined up with Anya and turned him into a little bit of a goofball. But of course here, Twilight is extremely serious. And from the information that we see in this chapter, it turns out that he may have been the reason for the recent leak in information that has been coming from the west to the east that resulted in a tremendous purge of Westalis agents in the east. And when they say purge, it's basically a clean statement for saying capture, interrogation, and most likely torture to the death of these agents. So I could imagine that for many of these agents, there is some very, very personal vendetta against this mole. And the information from the informants of the WISE organization have found out Winston seems to be headed for Shelbury Hotel, where he probably will meet with the Ostanian secret police. So of course, the WISE organization is going there to see if they can capture him at that location. And Fiona and a few other agents, including Lloyd, is on their way there. But of course, we also know that Yuri and his group is going there, including Yuri's commander. And what's interesting is when they arrive, they are not in the secret police uniform, but undercover. And when questioning the commander with regards to why they are undercover in their own country, it turns out that because there are diplomatic relationships between the West and the East, as much as this is information that's being taken, it will be a delicate situation if something got out of hand that caused tension between the West and the East. So like Mission Impossible, where they tell their agents that they're on their own, here Ostania is not really supporting the secret police so that they can have distance if anything happens. And with that, we're starting to understand this is escalating into a very strong situation. And of course, Yuri and his group are on their way to the Shelbury Hotel to pick Winston up. And what's interesting is when the WISE organization gives their command to the team, that the majority of people will go to the hotel to capture Winston, but Lloyd or Twilight will go to meet with the Ostanian secret police under disguise to try to create a diversion. and hold them off. Now at the same time, we see that the Ostanian secret police have sent their command to Winston with regards to meeting them to give the information. And what's interesting is you could see the similarity that Tatsuya Endo is putting on these two agents by the response, or the similarity of the response that you see in this chapter. And like a good agent, before going to the actual meeting spot, Winston actually takes surveillance of the area and notices that there are enemy agents in the area, most likely not from the recognition of how they look, but just like with other situations, watching their actions and realizing that there are people there who are watching the perimeter. And so rather than to go to the rendezvous point, he looks around for a Ostanian agent, and noticing Yuri, he goes up to him and tells him that he must be Ostanian secret police, and he is here for the meeting. Which of course shocks Yuri because he is undercover. How did Winston recognize him? And since he's not really sure if this is Winston or if this is an enemy agent such as Twilight under disguise, he wasn't sure how much he can trust him. But based on the way Winston was dressed, he felt that this was actually Winston. And Winston telling Yuri that the meeting place has been compromised, he has told Yuri to tell his seniors to meet them at the park. And so the chapter ends with the Ostanian secret police meeting Winston Wheeler at the park to receive the information. So now you can see things are getting really, really tense, because if that information does get to the Ostanian secret police, the entire WISE organization is compromised. And even if they decide to pull back and get out of that situation, that will mean that they will have to shut down all of Operation Strix and probably disband this spy family, which of course none of us want to see. And so there probably will be something else that will happen. Now what's interesting is, because we know that Twilight is such a master of disguise and we have been surprised by many of his switches in the past, many of the readers who have commented on this chapter have stated that it's most likely that Winston is actually Twilight at the end of the chapter. The Winston that has come up to the park is actually Twilight. And as much as I would like to say, yeah, that might be true, there is another possibility, which is that Twilight is not Winston. This actually is Winston Wheeler, but Twilight is the other agent that's about to receive the information. If they don't want the information to get to the hands of the Ostanian secret police, who better to disguise as but the guy who receives that information so that Twilight can take it away from them? Now this will be interesting. If that turns out to be true, this will be a battle of wits between Winston and Twilight right at this moment. Now if Twilight is Winston in this situation, it will be interesting, because how will Twilight resolve this situation if he's the one who has to give information rather than to take it away? And the only thing I could think of is that he will give false information to the Ostanian secret police so that they go on a wild goose chase. But it still doesn't resolve the issue that the real Winston is still running around with that information, then they still have to take it away from him. So, what will happen? Is Winston still with Yuri on the way to the park? And is this Winston who has met the Ostanian secret police actually Twilight? And will there be a skirmish later on when they find out there are two Winstons? Or is Twilight one of the other agents who will receive the information? And if so, will the next chapter show Winston trying to figure out if this other agent is really who they say they are? Winston Wheeler is an interesting character, and I hope Tatsuya Endo doesn't get rid of him in this chapter through death or being captured, but I hope he gets away, because he will create a wonderful nemesis against Twilight for future chapters. This guy seems to be really, really good, and he will be able to give Lloyd a run for his money. Now, we still don't know if Yor's gonna come out in all of this, but it's still too early to find out. Everything is still being set up, and we know that we haven't even come close to the climax yet. So it will be interesting to see how this will twist around, because Tatsuya Endo likes to give twists. And he also knows that he's been giving so many disguise twists in the past that people will most likely naturally think that Winston Wheeler is actually Twilight. So will he give a twist and a twist to find out that this isn't Twilight and Twilight is somebody else? It'll be interesting to find out, but we won't know until we see chapter 82. And once it comes out, I'll bring out another video, and I hope you join me at that time. But this is the chapter 81 discussion for Spy Family. If you read it, what'd you think about it? Who do you think Twilight is disguised as? Any comments that you leave will be greatly appreciated. And until the next episode, happy manga reading, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.